Well, the Supreme Court weighed in yesterday, staying a Biden administration move away from that Title 42 requirement that said that actually they had to let people into the country, and now they're going to have to keep them out, at least for the time being, until the Supreme Court decides what to do. To take us through the politics of this, not so much the law, but the politics, we welcome Bloomberg political contributors Rick Davis of Stone Court Capital and Jeanne Zaino of Iona University. So, Jeanne, I'm going to start with you, actually. What are the politics of this from Joe Biden's point of view? And by the way, is it possible this sort of let him off the hook?
It's very possible. I saw this as a gift from the Supreme Court and the conservatives on the court to Joe Biden and the Biden administration, because, of course, had they agreed to lift Title 42, they were facing an even larger influx of migrants on the border. And as we've heard from El Paso and all the border states, they are not prepared to handle that. So while I don't expect we'll hear that publicly from the administration, this does buy them a little bit of time to see if they can get some kind of policy in place, be it by February or whenever the court decides to rule, that they can then be in a position to address the migrants coming over the border. Because, of course, under Title 42, 2.5 million migrants have been expelled, much to the dismay of immigrant rights groups. But, of course, the Biden administration has to address the security issues as well.
So, Rick, maybe a little temporary respite here, but sooner or later they're going to have to address the underlying issue, right? It doesn't look like these immigrants are going to go away. And by the way, just as soon as we decide where they're coming from, they come from a different point. They're coming from places like Colombia now.
That's right. These two issues you just mentioned were brought out in Justice Gorsuch, who actually voted against the majority on this one, and was a bit of a surprise. But he said, look, there's no doubt there's a crisis on the border, but this is not the way to fix it. This is a COVID-era policy that has to do with public health. It's got nothing to do with border security and or the use of the law to manage these immigrants. And part of what's been happening is the repatriations of people back to their home countries because of Title 42 has really trailed off. I mean, many of the Venezuelans, we can't get them back into Venezuela. The Cubans, we have a policy not to be making flights into Cuba. So we're not even able to get them out of our country. Mexico's made it very clear they don't belong in Mexico. And so they're kind of stuck in this lack of policy. And I think the message that Gorsuch was telling us was, hey, why doesn't Congress and the administration get together and find a public policy route to solve this, because there's not a legal route to solve it.
So Rick, I'm going to pick on you because your old boss, John McCain, the senator, former presidential candidate, really cared about this immigration issue a lot. Now, it's different today than it was then. But if, in fact, Congress, under John McCain, were going to fix this, what would John McCain have done?
Well, he would have had a comprehensive approach, because the problem with immigration politics is there's no one fix, right? Not everybody is just going to build the border wall, right, and lock down the border. That was the Trump-era strategy that didn't work. And not everybody wants to allow there to be a guest worker program without more security. So what you've got to do, and then there's the dreamers and other issues. And so what you have to do is you have to bundle all these fixes into one comprehensive bill where you can find people who support each and every one of them, and together they're a majority. Together they can actually beat a filibuster in the Senate. And so that's the only way he felt you could actually legitimately tackle it. And frankly, all these fixes need to occur in order for us to have a legitimately good immigration policy. And that's exactly what I think John McCain would have been fighting for today.
And just to follow up on that, I don't ever say I agree with Neil Gorsuch, maybe a couple times, but I agree with his dissent joined by Ketanji Brown Jackson. He said, exactly as Rick said, that this is the role of Congress. The problem is there is zero incentive for the 118th Congress to address this before the 24 election. So we will not see it happen. You can go right back to the election of George W. Bush. He couldn't beat get the votes he needed to beat cloture in 2007. He dropped it, followed by Obama, followed by, Trump, and now Joe Biden. Nobody has been able to get this through Congress. We saw Kristen Sinema, Tom Tillis come up with a proposal, limited as it was in the lame duck. They couldn't make any headway on that. So the problem is, as we see so often in this country with Congress is not incentivized to address this crisis. And so they're trying to hide under a public health measure to address an immigration crisis. And unfortunately, Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, and it's not what should happen. This should be addressed in Congress. There are policies in place to do that, but very little political will to follow through. And I would say, particularly on the Republican side, where they see this as a winning strategy to hit the Biden administration and Kamala Harris over the head for not having an immigration policy, there is a crisis in this country in immigration, no question, but it's going to take both parties to solve it, and that's not going to happen in this Congress.
Rick, as you know, here at Bloomberg, we talk from time to time about market failures in the markets. Is there a political market failure here? Because picking up on what Jeanne just said, I have a friend who handled elected office, who's a pretty smart guy, who says that basically elected representatives have one goal, which is get reelected. Is there anybody you think is going to help them get reelected to address this issue?
Yeah, there is no profiling courage on this issue in the current Congress. And maybe one of the things that they could consider and the administration could play along with is an eminent commission that could actually put together a deal, put together a policy that's actually good for America and actually do an up or down vote on that policy, right? We used to do this quite a bit in politics, is we'd get an eminent commission, they'd work really hard, they'd do the right public policy, and then you just vote on it and make it a bill. And I think in this case, maybe that's one of the options that a Congress that lacks courage can actually be for.